What is going on, everybody? It is that male CNA. Should change it to PCT or medical technician, but we will worry about that at another time. Hint, hint. So, today, guys, the food for thought is, why do people expect so much and give so little? And by that, I mean, what is going on with my coworkers? Where are they? How long have they been gone on their 2-hour-long breaks? What is going on with their call bells as they seem to be popping off one by one? Well, this is something that I don't usually complain about, but lately it has been happening quite too often because I let it happen. Or the facility just doesn't say anything about it. So, by 2 hours, I mean these people will go on their lunch breaks, wink wink, and will not return for 2 hours. That being said, they just pop up at the last hour and a half of the shift, do a round of changing, and they're gone. Their call bells are going off the entire time. People don't answer them, and you're stuck with handling an entire 40-bed unit by yourself on a rehab side. So, with that, there's a lot of people who will not answer that person's call bells after a said and or allotted amount of time, and is stuck with you to make the decision to answer those call bells or not. Everyone's a different worker. Some people will answer them, some people don't. I unfortunately am one of those people who do answer those call bells because, 9 times out of 10 it is something simple, like I've said before in previous videos, but it just is something that is important to me to make sure that the residents are all good. I always do constant checks just because, the overnights people could get a little bit restless from staying inside their beds, but I always make sure the people are good to go. With that being said, I do feel as though a lot of residents do need those constant visual checks just because they need the help. Maybe they need some ice water, hey, I need to be changed real quick. Okay, let me pop in and make sure you're good. Unfortunately, a lot of these nursing homes are so desperate for staff. The people that show up to work are usually the ones that get stuck with, all the issues. And the facilities are in such desperate need of staff. Who shows up is the one that keeps their job. That's just the way it works in today's healthcare field. Now, a little bit of more of a food for thought, which is pretty much the main idea of this video, is your scope of practice, guys. It is incredibly important, and we'll touch base a little bit on it. I'm not going to speak because I'm not an authority on the subject, but guys, do what your job description or your license asks you. Do not go above and beyond that, okay? Because you're not only putting your license at risk, but you're putting the patient's safety at risk too. That is the biggest issue. When I teach my students to only do what a CNA job entails you to do, which is, it could be vitals, it's changing, washing, feeding, etc., etc. Guys, don't go and try and insert a Foley tube when you're a CNA, as that's clearly an RN or an LPN type of job, okay? Don't go and try and administer medication unless you're certified to do so and you're dependent on your state. Now, I see a lot of people try and be superheroes or nursing students or anything like that. I'm sure if you have your first 2 semesters done, well, congratulations. You can go ahead and test out and be an LPN in the state of New York. I don't know how it works elsewhere. A lot of facilities don't expect you to do other than what your job description tells you to do. Do what is in your scope of practice to make sure your license stays safe, but also, number one, the patient's safety as well. Okay, if I go and administer 100 milligrams of, let's say Vicodin, and it only calls for 50, you're giving them more than what they are supposed to be given the doctor's orders. That is a serious issue because you don't know what you're doing to make sure they're getting the proper medication dosage, or more important, let's just say someone who's a diabetic and you give them too much insulin. That's another big issue as well. Maybe their blood sugar level doesn't call for any insulin whatsoever, and you're giving it to them, and hey, you're not supposed to be doing that. So like I said, guys, stay in accordance with what your scope of practice is, okay? Now, let's do another little thing here. Let's shift topics a little bit. Now, I tend to try and really talk about this because it could be a touchy subject to some people, but sometimes it just can't be helped. So let's talk about understaffing. Okay, this is something that I really try not to complain about because we signed up for our job. Okay, now if you have 2 aides on the unit and you have a 40 bed, let's just say there's 40 beds and you're at 38% capacity, or 38 residents in capacity, right? Which means there's 2 empty beds. You maybe have like 2 or 3 residents that take care of themselves, and the rest are either Hoyers or check-in changes or total cares dependent, right? They need help in every aspect of their care, whether it's dressing, turning and positioning, having their oral care done, getting out of the bed, such as a Hoyer lift or a 2 assist or a 1 assist, right? Guys, with the understaffing issue that all of healthcare faces right now, I'm sure that it is short everywhere. You know, I'm reading stories constantly about how understaffing these facilities face fines, and then they'll advertise for jobs, and maybe they'll get 1 or 2 people to fill in positions. The facility I work at currently, having a CNA school, which I don't have anything to do with that. I've heard it through the grapevine, and you know, it all depends on how many students actually stick with the facility thereafter. But yeah, let's get back into focus. So, with that being said, you know, the job expectancy is that you still get everything done, and more often or not, you know, I work pretty much a weekend warrior schedule. You know, I work Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I'll do a 12 and then 2 doubles, and then have off Monday through Thursday. I'm doing that because, well, some good news. I'm starting school in August for my RN. So there's that at least. I'm looking forward to it. It's definitely going to be my life for a couple of years. And yeah, we'll just go from there. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how much I'm able to handle and all that good stuff. Now, that being said, guys, the short staffness, the short staff levels in these nursing homes is pretty much getting to a critical point, which is what I try and be realistic with my students and telling them that, you know, we face a lot of obstacles as the backbones of these facilities, whether you're a nurse or a CNA. Nurses are dealing with the 40 medications that they have to hand out, or 38, whatever your census is. And the CNAs are the ones who are dealing with all the checks and changes, making sure people are good. There's always last minute things, guys. That's why I start early on rounds to make sure that people are good. You know, I wouldn't imagine being in another field right now. I love what I do, but sometimes, you know, it does get stressful, and you don't get used to the realistic workload that is accompanied and or expected by these facilities, right? You know, you do face a lot of challenges, but like, I tell everybody, it's like, hey, listen, we signed up to do this. This is what is expected of us, and that's it. You know, I try not to complain, but lately I found myself being a little bit more naggy, and that's what I wanted to touch base upon. And that is, the weekends are the worst to work. You know, there's this other YouTuber that has touched base about this. His name is Chris the Dude Nurse. Possibly my top 5 channels of all time for videos that I watch. You know, I watch the guy constantly. Definitely inspired me to make this YouTube channel to some degree. You know, something I wanted to do for quite some time. And guys, we are really close to that 100 subscriber goal. Hopefully we can hit that by the end of the year. I promise you, I am going to be uploading more videos when it comes to healthcare, especially when it comes to nursing school. I'll be telling you guys everything that I'm learning, and we'll go from there. But like I said, guys, you know, these facilities, they do expect a lot, and that, you know, that leads to severe healthcare worker burnout. You know, I find myself alone from like pretty much 11 to 3 o'clock, you know, if they have the coverage, and if not, you know, I just do my round of changing, help out with the med pass with the nurse, whoever needs help, you know, I help them, because I'm licensed to do so, guys. Like I said, scope of practice. Now, with that being said, you know, a lot of the time you find yourself with, you know, on my run, usually I have about 4 get-ups that I do, because I take one of the gentlemen who's a little bit too touchy-feely with the women. But with that being said, you know, I voluntarily do that, so that's not really an issue that should be spoken upon, but I do. I still manage to get 95% of my people done before the end of the shift, and then I'll go back and then change the heaviest wetter again. Just to make sure that the day shift is good to go. You know, they're going to be due for changing when the people get in anyways. You're pretty much just there to make sure that your people are high and dry and good to go. For overnights, that's where I find myself working, because I don't like dealing with the suit and ties. That's just between you and my viewers. Now, with that being said, guys, there is a lot of stuff that could be said about healthcare worker burnout, but that is an entire video in itself and what leads to that. But I feel like the most critical aspect of that is the understaffing in nursing homes, okay? You know, I know the state in which I work, which is New York, is always desperate for CNAs. You know, the baby boomers are now coming to that age where they're starting to come into nursing homes, and that's just more in an abundance of people that are going to be taken care of by you or me or whoever else is working in these facilities. And you know, going from there, you know, just take it one step at a time, guys. Take your breaks that you're, you know, supposed to be given. I know 9 times out of 10 I do like a 1-3, and I start my final rounds like 4:30, 4:45, sometimes a little bit earlier depending on whether I'm by myself or not. But like I said, guys, you know, this field is not easy, and I want you to get into it with realistic expectations about what these facilities expect of you. There's a lot of the time, you know, you will find yourself working by yourself. You know, in that situation, I'll get the people dressed and changed, and I'll leave a Hoyer pad underneath them so the day shift can just pop them up once they get there. You know, going from there, you know, I find myself not really alone, but alone at the same time, you know, because I do have a licensed nurse there to help me out if I really need it. Like last night, one of the RNs saw that I needed to go and do my Hoyer lift. There was another aide on the unit that I was working on, but she was doing her own thing, so I didn't really want to bother her. The RN saw, you know, I was kind of looking and walking around for someone that could help me with a Hoyer lift, and she popped in the room. She's like, "Hey, you need some help?" I'm like, "Yes, please." I'm like, "Thank you." You know, with that being said, guys, it is a difficult job. You know, at the end of the day, it does lead to a lot of people wanting to go do something else. And like I said, you know, I tell my students, don't let being a CNA be your final step. Don't let that be the job that you end up having to work for 20 or 30 years, because it leads to so many, you know, physical and debilitating health issues. But, you know, I tell them, like, you know, you're going in this field with the expectance that you're going to be well taken care of at the end of the day, okay? You got to take care of your residents, but you also got to focus on your own mental, personal, and physical health. You know, just I did ramble on a little bit in this video, guys, but it is one that I wanted to touch base upon, and we will go from there, and I'll make sure this video gets nice and uploaded. Other than that, guys, that male CNA out, soon to be RN. Thanks.